Welcome back to another video. Today I'd like to talk about storage in our vintage systems. So we're probably all familiar with 3.5-inch hard drives that have some platters in them that spin around, and there's heads that seek back and forth and they read the magnetic information on the platters, and they're loud, they're prone to failure, they're very sensitive to shock, temperature, long-term storage, rubber degradation. These things are a pain. And then we also have the little brother, the 2.5-inch drive, which is much the same, but even more prone to failure, at least in my experience. So what do we do with our vintage systems? They're not making these anymore. And you can find some replacements for IDE, but there's much cheaper options for vintage computing. So on the Mac side, we have a number of devices like Blue SCSI, SCSI to SD, and they work pretty well. But that's for SCSI. If you have a PC with a SCSI card, you can use something like that. But most PCs are IDE or PATA, as it was later renamed. And for that, we have some devices as well. So I wanted to talk about my experience with these today in my vintage systems and kind of give a quick demo and talk about some of the experiences I've had with buying some of these things on the internet. So stick around after the intro and we'll jump right into it. Alright, so first let's talk about this device. So this is an SD card to IDE adapter. It takes either the Molex power or the Berg power, has an IDE port, has a bunch of components including a little microcontroller and an SD card slot. Now you can buy these on Amazon or eBay, and I've had two, and neither of them have ever worked for me. So I don't know if these just aren't compatible with the SD cards I'm using. I don't know if they're not compatible with the machines I've tried them in, and I've tried them in a number of machines, both PC and Mac, but I just can't get these to work. So if this is something that you think would be really cool, like, yeah, I want to have an SD card, I want to use it as a hard drive for a vintage machine, I don't have any tips other than avoid the ones that look just like this. I just can't say anything good about them because I have never gotten them to work. It's a no from me. And again, this is just my experience. Other people may have had really good luck with these, but no luck here. So next we have compact flash adapters. And I'll talk about this more later in the video, but these are adapters that take your standard compact flash card, like this, plugs in, and then you can plug it right into your IDE slot. The 3.5-inch one, which would be, what's used in most desktop computers, instead of having to run a cable, this just plugs right into the slot, assuming you have the clearance, and I'll talk more about that later as well. And then we also have the 44-pin IDE one, which would plug into a laptop. So if you wanted to have a solid-state compact flash card in the laptop, this is the kind of thing you need. So now with the 44-pin 2.5-inch adapter, there is no additional power. Power is carried through the connector pins, but with the standard desktop PATA connection, it does have the Berg connector as well. So I've had a ton of luck with this adapter. Let's take this card out of here, we'll talk about that. But I've had a ton of luck with this adapter. I think you can buy these on Amazon for $5 or $6. They're relatively cheap, and for the most part, they just work. We'll talk about why this particular one had issues later in the video, but I've had a number of these, and they're not all affected by the issue of bad soldering, and they always just seem to work. So these are good. No concerns about these. But then when we start talking about compact flash cards, this is where sometimes you'll run into a lot of problems. So we'll cover this later in the video as we start working through things. I just wanted to give a quick overview of what we'd be talking about today. So let's cut over to the bench and we'll get one of these installed, tested, and we'll talk about all of the pitfalls that I've experienced through my time in using these things. So what I have here are some IDE 44-pin to compact flash adapters, and I have some compact flash cards. So I've used these in the past for a number of projects, and when you get good ones, everything works fine for the most part. But the trick is finding the good ones. So if you go on Amazon, there's lots of listings for these. There's lots of listings for compact flash cards. And you need to be careful about which ones you buy and you can't really ever predict what you're going to get. So with these compact flash cards, a lot of times you get a rebadged one, a fake one, and Amazon's happy to do return. But if you're trying to build up a legacy system for something, then you really don't want the hassle of having to keep buying cards and returning them, buying cards and returning them. So compact flash is based on the IDE architecture, so they are pin compatible, and these adapters just adapt basically the pins so that you can plug your compact flash card into the 44 pin IDE thing. And they do have one little jumper on them to set primary and secondary for that drive. So these typically are pretty good. It's kind of hard to screw this up, but that's happened as well. So I have this one here, and these come in female and male varieties. So this one has a few more pins. It has a Berg power connector, but the problem with this one is they soldered the connector on backwards. So it had a notch here, because the IDE connections typically have a notch, and that's how you know where pin 1 goes. You don't get it backwards. But they put this on backwards, so with the notch there, if you put this in, it didn't work. You'd actually have to turn it around, but to do that, I had to shave the notch off. So these work fine, but they were just soldered on incorrectly. And I actually got I think 5 of these, and they were all backwards. So whoever was working on the assembly line they just simply put the things on backwards. So I know this one works. I don't need to worry about testing it. Used it in the past, just wanted to show it as having the pin that's incorrect here. So these smaller ones are typically used to replace a 2.5 inch drive like you'd find in a laptop that had an IDE interface. I'll take it out of the bag here. Now these ones don't have any sort of pin marking, and if you look on the circuit board here, it is not labeled which is which. So that can make things a bit tricky. Now what's interesting is I bought these 3 all from the same order on Amazon, and they showed up in 3 different packages, so I assume they came from 3 different sources. And this is the female version. With the female, you could run it into your IDE cable to where your hard drive used to be, and maybe it makes more sense for you to do it there. So that would be used in cases where there's just not enough clearance to have this sitting upright. Maybe there's something else in the way, and just the cable would fit. But we'll be using this today to test out the compact flash cards that we have here. The female one came with instructions, IDE ATA 33 spec, IDE mode. It talks about all these features that it supports. It literally just takes these pins and turns them into this pins, and has a jumper for primary or secondary. Like all of the stuff that it claims to do, that's just all built into the technology itself. So that's kind of funny. All right, so let's put these guys away. We'll get around to using one of these later, but for now, we're most interested in looking at these compact flash cards. Compact flash cards are based on the IDE architecture. They're pin compatible, as I mentioned, but the spec for compact flash cards does not require that they work on an IDE bus. So you could get a compact flash card that doesn't support running as an IDE hard drive, only supports running as a compact flash card. Now there's 2 variants of compact flash. There's standard that you get everywhere. They're super cheap. They're not really meant to be used as replacements for hard drives because they have limited read-write cycles. The writes typically will kill them pretty quickly. And then there's the industrial versions, which are meant for repeated read-write cycles. Now, if you're installing Windows likes to have a swap file for virtual memory, and that is continually writing and reading and writing and reading from the disk. So if you don't have an industrial one, which these, according to Amazon, are industrial, then you'll have a very limited amount of time before that CF card just completely fails. So yeah, as I mentioned, these are on Amazon. We'll see how they work. We'll see if they're actually 16 gigabytes. We'll see if they work at all. And we'll do some performance testing to see if they are truly industrial or not. And that's the problem with Amazon. You can go in and you can find dozens, hundreds of different CF cards that claim to be industrial, claim to have, fast throughput, claim to be authentic. And you buy them and then you end up with cards that just simply don't work at all. So I have some examples here of fake cards that simply either don't work or are reporting to be a size that they are not. So these Lilywell cards that I got from Amazon, they just don't work. I had a number of them and I returned all of them. I kept one just so I remember never to buy them again. But they didn't work on modern PCs, they didn't work on legacy PCs, they didn't work in cameras. They just simply don't work. So I don't know if it was a manufacturing defect, an intentional fraud, but My advice is don't buy these. Maybe I just had a bad batch. It's certainly possible. And then there's these cloud disk cards that report themselves as 8 and 32 gigabytes. I think they're actually like 1 gigabyte or 512 megabytes. And when you write to them, it just overwrites the existing data that's on there. So it'll show up to the system as an 8 gigabyte card, a 32 gigabyte card, but if you write data to it, it just repeats back to the first bit and just overwrites what's there. So if you buy one of these and you put it in your camera and take a bunch of pictures, it's just going to be overwriting the pictures that you had there. And if you try to install Windows on it, or Linux or DOS or anything that exceeds that 512 megabyte limit or 1 gigabyte limit, whatever it was, it's just going to overwrite the files and corrupt the system. Didn't like the cloud disk ones, didn't like the Lilywell ones, so I found these ones here, and these are completely unbranded, which is definitely worrying. You think if a company is selling you something they believe will work, they would put their logo on it and not just have what appears to be a forged background reprinted in some Chinese manufacturing shop that stripped off the company name. On the back, it just says compact flash, and there's some space there to write whatever information you wanted to write. So if we take one out, it looks like a standard compact flash card. Probably there's a good chance it's 16 gigabytes. There's probably less of a chance that it's an actual industrial grade compact flash. I think to be 100% sure, the easiest way to identify an industrial one is to go on eBay, find one that has a Cisco label on it, and just buy that. The problem with the Cisco ones is they're all usually pretty small, 32 megabytes or something. It makes it challenging to figure out what you want to do. I'll buy some of these and stock up and find some that work and be good for 6 months, a year, and then I'll run out because I've used them in projects, and then I need to go buy more, and then it's the whole struggle again. Can I find good ones? Can I find ones that work? Can I find ones that are industrial? Just a pain in the butt. All right, so we're going to use this one here in the standard desktop IDE adapter with the Berg connector. So let me get a computer, and we will install that and get a Windows install going. Hopefully, if it recognizes the drive. All right, so for today, we'll be using this Dell Optiplex GX1. This is a Pentium 3 450. Nothing too special about it. I have a soft spot in my heart for these machines because I had one as a work computer way back in 2000, I think, actually. All right, so with this machine, and this is talking about why you might want a female version of these. So I have my IDE cable here. If I had the female version, I could just plug it right in. But since I have the male version, I need to take my cable out. And this machine has no hard drive. So I'll take the cable out, and then I can connect my Berg connector as power. There is no power provided on the IDE bus for 3.5-inch drives, but on the 2.5-inch drives, power is provided on the connectors, so it doesn't have a special Berg connector. So I just gotta dig around and find a Berg connector. I might have one. Otherwise, you can buy an adapter to take down to a Berg connection, which is what I have here. All right, so as mentioned, these had a notch. This has a notch, and this notch is backwards. So I'm just gonna go ahead and plug this in what would normally be considered backwards, but because of the issues, it is the right way. So we'll just make sure that's in there nice and snugly. And now we can hook this machine up to a monitor and see if we can see the drive, install to it, partition it, format it, all the fun stuff. All right, so a little off kilter here, but I think that's going to work for us. So we'll hit F2 to get to the setup. So we can immediately see that it did auto-detect primary drive 0, which is our compact flash card. So that's a really good sign. It sees it as 8 gigabytes, which is not super great, but I think it just might be reporting things incorrectly there. So we will see if we can actually format it. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is pop in a Windows XP CD that I've got here. And let's see if we can't boot off that and see the drive and install to it. All right, so we have our boot order set. So boot our Windows XP CD. All right, so we want to do a clean install of Windows XP. So hit enter. And there we go. It says examining 15 gigabyte disk, 15.8 or something. So that is good. It means it sees the disk and it's the correct size. So we'll say that we agree to this. and it does see partition 1 labeled as CF card. I'm going to go ahead and delete this partition, and we'll just install to this unpartitioned space using NTFS format and quick format. Alright, well, we'll just let the Windows XP install run, and then we can do some testing with it once that has completed. Just in case you're curious, that's what the activity light looks like while it's installing Windows here. So green is card detected, red's power, and amber is activity. And with Windows XP, you can't just walk away because it requires input 2 or 3 times depending if it finds a network card. So with modern Windows, you can just go ahead and hit install, walk away, come back, enter your password, and you're good to go. Not the case with Windows XP. Alright, so we're at our Windows XP desktop. We've got our hard drive here. Everything looks just fine. So I think the next thing I want to do is I'm going to run SpinRite on this disk. So I'm going to go ahead and reboot it, boot off of DOS here, and we will run SpinRite. Alright, so I just booted off my boot floppy. Now I've inserted my SpinRite disk, so we can just go ahead and run SpinRite. Alright, so we want to select an operation. We want to select refresh the surfaces. So what this does is it reads the data that's in each byte on disk and then writes it back and then reads it to make sure that it was written correctly. So while SpinRite is made for spinning disks to look for unrecoverable sectors, this will put the compact flash card through an exhaustive test. So I'm going to let it run overnight, and that should give us a pretty good clue about the longevity of this card. Alright, so we're going to select our C drive. We will skip the benchmarks, don't really care. So like I said, I'm just going to let this run overnight, and we will see how it looks in the morning. Alright, so I actually ended up using one of the other blank CF cards for this test. A good test to have a second data point. We know we could install Windows XP on the first one without issue, so I wanted to put this second card through its paces. So it ran through once, I woke up and it had finished, so I ran it a second time. So let's take a look at the results here. Alright, so it ran through, it took an hour 43 this time, and it found 0 issues. That's a pretty good sign that these probably are industrial, though, I don't know that just doing the SpinRite test twice on a CF is going to fully expose any issues with it, but I think it's a pretty good indicator that these are actually what Amazon said they were. Alright, well, let's wrap this one up and give you my final thoughts. Alright, so to sum up, these are the adapters I like that work really well, and I think this card is going to work really well as well. You can find these right now. It is the end of January 2024 on Amazon. They're fairly cheap, but again, if you buy these, you might get a different batch. You might get a card that looks just like this one because they use the same sticker, and it's really hit or miss. So when I buy them, I like to buy a handful. That way I know that if I have good ones, I'll have a bunch of good ones, and if I have bad ones, I can just send them back to Amazon. And one final note, if you have a machine you're trying to restore and it has a SATA drive, just get one of these. You don't have to mess with all this other stuff. You can buy SATA drives that are SSDs, plug them right in, and you're good to go. This is 128 gigabytes, which is more than enough for any retro computing that you're doing, and I think these are $15 on Amazon. So they don't have a DRAM cache, they're not fast, but neither is your vintage computer. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you got something out of this video, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Hi guys, make sure to like and subscribe and watch more of our videos later. Bye!